Talk Radio 600 WBOB welcomes you to Life Radio, where we ask the experts about everything concerning your home, your health, and your happiness. Life Radio is brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303 for the Orange Park Cancer Center. Now, here's your host, John Vitas.
Good morning and welcome to Life Radio on this beautiful Sunday morning. Skies are clear. Looks good out there. Hope your Christmas shopping's all done. And I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas right at the onset of the show, because sometimes I get caught up at the end of the show and forget a couple of my little thank yous that I should give out. So I want to extend everybody a Merry Christmas wish today, and hopefully you have a very safe holiday. And speaking of the holidays, I'm going to touch on something today that initially I thought it was going to be pretty much kind of all gloom and doom, but my guest has said, no, John, we're going to put some happiness in here as well, because that's what her specialty is. Today, joining me in the studio is Tracy Riley. She's a graduate from Auburn University. She's got a master's degree in social work. She's also got a master's from the Florida State University. She picked that up in 2005. She's a clinical social worker in the state of Florida, and she's worked with hundreds of individuals and families over the years. In 2009, she was asked to join a local agency here in Jacksonville called Compassionate Families that serves people affected by homicide. I'm responsible, or should I say she's responsible, for creating all the therapeutic programs that are needed out there, programs for youth served through the program, and she provides grief counseling to both adults and children. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today is, you know, we're in the holiday season, and a lot of people, and me included, have at some time or another in their life, sometimes recently, sometimes maybe not that, maybe sometimes years ago, have lost a loved one. And it's something that we can't ever shake, and that's something that she made clear to me. I was like, asking her off air, I was like, when are we going to, or when am I going to be able to shake this? And she said, you won't. It's just how you deal with it and so forth that keeps you going. So today, the main subject matter here on Life Radio is dealing with the loss of a loved one during the holiday season. And I want to once again welcome into the studios here today Miss Tracy Riley. How are you doing today, Tracy?
Good, John. Thank you for having me again. I always look forward to our time together.
Well, as many of you might not know, as Tracy also appeared with us on the Family Law 411 show, which comes on just before Life Radio, and she discussed a lot of things that goes on in the court having to do with children. And Tracy is a multifaceted person, and today she's going to change gears a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about she's going to put on the grief counseling hat. So, Tracy, you know, I lost a good friend of mine 2008, I believe it was, in April of 2008. You know, Stephen Ranville, very good friend of mine, and I'm still dealing with it. Him and I go way back. We worked and built motorcycles together, went racing. I mean, I've been all over the Southeast with him, going to different racing venues and so forth. Some which I was announcing, some which we were actually competing in. And, we shared a lot, known him for over, I'm going to say, somewhere around the 30 to 40 year mark. So it's been a long time that I've known him. And it seems like, for us, Christmas was Daytona Bike Week every year. And the last couple of years, I've really, Tracy, it's just, the fire just wasn't there. And while I'm trying to deal with it, it's still inside, and here at the holiday season, obviously I think about him as well. He was lived by himself, and my wife and I always try to make sure we got him over for dinner and so forth, and got him a present and so forth. I mean, he's a really great guy, and one of the things that hurts me, and I didn't talk to you about this off air, so I hope you're ready for the surprise question. But his younger brother Kevin, which is actually my age, him and I are really close as well. But one of the things that hurts me so much, Tracy, and I haven't really ever told Kevin about this because I want him to get the wrong feeling, but his movements and a lot of his sayings and so forth, and even his tone sounds just like Steve, and it seems like every time I call him, it's almost like another stab. What can I do to fix that?
That's absolutely very common. One thing that I say a lot, John, is that grief has a beginning, but it never really has an end. This isn't something that you get over. This is something that you get through. And so anytime we lose someone that we've spent a lot of time with or that is close to us, we have to learn new ways. A new normal is what we call it, And we have to find ways to keep them in a part of our lives, because while death will end a life, it does not end a relationship. And so with the brother being here, it sounds like you almost have constant reminders of what your friend was like for you. And that can be good, because that helps you keep his memory alive and remember some of the things you may have forgotten. But then it is a constant reminder. But when we experience a loss from someone, we want to be reminded about them. You know, people a lot of times will say, oh, just forget about them. Try not to think about them. Well, we can't do that. We're humans. We're born to love, and we're born to have attachments to people. And so it's impossible to just forget someone that you've been friends with for so long.
So what I'm hearing is if you're struggling to try to forget that person, then you might want to ask yourself, wait a second here. I loved and cared for that person. I don't want to forget them.
Absolutely. You can't forget someone. And the people, a lot of times well-meaning individuals will say to you, well, honey, at least you had him for 45 years. A lot of people don't get that. You should just be thankful. Or you had a good mama. Just be thankful that you had a good mama. A lot of people don't have a good mama. Or keep your chin up. Don't think about it. And those people, they want to do well for us, and they want us to feel better, but that's not what we need at a time where we're experiencing grief. We want to be supportive. We want to be supported in that time, and we want people to help us keep those memories alive.
And something else that I feel guilty about, it seems like, and I think this is fairly common, it seems like when we lose a loved one, be it a friend or a family member, in a lot of cases, especially, in mine in particular as well, one of the first things that was upsetting to me was self-guilt. Like, I should have went over and saw that person more, and I should have done this, and we should have, spent more time with them and so forth. I guess that's a degree of grief that you specialize in and try to make people feel better about. Don't put yourself down. I mean, you did what you did, and yes, you could have improved on it, but obviously you can't go back and fix it. So what you, I guess, have to do is look forward and quit seeing all the bad and things and say, well, look, I guess if I'd have never known them at all, that would have definitely been worse.
Right. Guilt is the gift that keeps on giving. That's a tough one, because we can always find things that we could have done differently or we should have done differently. We call it a case of the if-onlys or the what-ifs. And there's a lot of times where if you need to talk about that, you play that out. And we'll get into this in a little bit, but if you have a counselor, that's something a grief counselor can help you with. Your friends might say, or your wife might say, oh, don't worry about it. Don't feel like that. You did the best you could. Don't feel guilty. But the truth is, you do feel guilty, and you do have those feelings of regret. And so a really good grief counselor will sit with you and kind of walk you through, well, what if you had been there more? What if you had done this differently? How would that have affected your relationship? How would that have affected your grief and mourning now that your friend has passed away? So guilt is something that you don't get over it, you work through it.
Right. And Tracy, I just want to thank you for coming on today. I know that we're supposed to be all happy and joyful and stuff at Christmas, and this this does bother me. I remember Steve, especially during these holidays. So I'm glad you come on today to help me. And if you're listening out there, you can call us at 854-1320 and share your story with us. You're listening to Life Radio on Talk Radio 600 WBOB. We'll be right back after these messages.
Talk Radio 600 WBOB. Now let's return to Life Radio. Brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303. The Orange Park Cancer Center at 276-2303. Here's your host, John Vitas.
And welcome back to Life Radio here on this beautiful Sunday morning. We are so glad you joined us here today. My name's John Vitas. I'm your host, and with me in the studio today is Tracy Riley. And what we're doing today was we're talking about how we deal with grief of the loss of a loved one. And a lot of times what it does is it kind of, that flame kind of gets fanned a little bit during the holiday season. We have a tendency to maybe get a little bit depressed about that person being missing at the table or whatever during Christmas, or just, someone close to us being gone. And it's tough. It's human nature for us to have emotions and to mourn and so forth. And I've got a caller online here. Dan, are you with me?
I'm with you.
Thanks for joining me this morning, Dan. Do you have a question you'd like to ask Tracy?
Well, there's just not really a question, comment.
Okay, sure.
I lost my wife in October of this year, Dignity Funeral Home and divorce, and we've been together for 17. The thing that I'm thinking now is that Thanksgiving was Christmas is even harder, okay? And I've had to come to the point now to where I'm not. I'm hurting badly. There's not a day that doesn't go that I don't wake up in the morning time or in the middle of the night and reach out for her, knowing she, full well she's not going to be there. And I had to come to terms with the fact that even though she passed away, the relationship is still there. I still love her very, very much. Probably more now than I did before. And I miss her. Point blank, I miss her.
How long did you say you guys were married, Dan?
17.
Dan, one thing that I would say, and we're gonna talk a little bit later in the show about ways to honor your wife during this Christmas season. But what I would say to you is any ritual that you guys had previously over the years, I would suggest to you that if you can find a way to continue those rituals, if she had a special stocking that you hung on the mantle, hang that stocking anyway. If you have pictures of her, leave those out. Do not let people guilt you into taking those down. She is still very much a part of your life. Like I said before, death ends a life, but not a relationship. So make sure you find ways that you can honor her and really remember her, because she will always be a part of your relationship. You'll always have that. And I'm so glad that you called in, because I can only imagine how tough it is to lose a family member right before the holidays.
Well, it was difficult. She's been in the hospital so much last year, 6 times in the past year.
Wow.
And she got tired. She wanted to go home. She didn't want to hurt no more. And I fully understand it. And it just, it caught me by surprise, because I would never have expected her to pass away. And I always thought, in fact, I didn't talk to her that morning, and I told her, I said, we're going walking on the beach, right? She nodded her head and told me she loved me. And it was all over and done with that evening.
Right.
So now I find myself in a situation like Christmas is coming up, and I'm trying to, I'm going to go to Mass on Christmas Eve and sit back and just relax. But it's little small things. I'll wake up in the middle of the night, look for her, and she's not there. I want to pick up the phone and call her. No, I can't. Something I did find that has helped me a lot is to sit down and take a pen and a paper and just write her a letter and get it off my chest. Whatever it is, whatever I want to tell her, get it off my chest.
Right, and that's a really good exercise that I do when I do grief counseling. And one thing that I would also suggest to you, Dan, is write a letter to yourself from her. Dear Dan is how I want you to start that letter. And write a letter to yourself from her, saying to yourself what you wish you could say or what you need her to say to you. And that's been really helpful for a lot of people.
Well, I know that she doesn't want me to hurt. I know that she didn't want me to cry, because she always told me that. She'd get on to never really. I grew up in a military family. When my father passed away, I was told that, grown men don't cry. And I bottled that emotion up for a number of years, and she helped bring that emotion back out in me. But she would get on to me occasionally. She said, if anything happens to me, don't cry. Don't be sitting there crying over me. And it's getting easier. It's not getting any better. I can tell you that right now. It's not getting any better.
Right.
It is getting easier, because, like, yesterday I was out with a friend, and that friend of mine was talking to me, and she kept asking. She said, surely you don't want to spend the day with me doing this, because there's some little small stuff she wanted. And I said, I really don't have anything to do. And she would ask me little questions, small stuff like that. And then last night when I came home, I realized what she was trying to pull me out of my shell.
Right.
And she was actually doing something to help me without telling me what she was doing. And it's just, I missed y'all's program. I caught the tail end of it last week. And I waited this week, call y'all, but I want to thank y'all for what y'all do because I take your suggestions to heart.
Good.
And I try to use them. I try to incorporate them. Okay?
Good.
And I was coming back from, Georgia the other day, and Albany, Georgia. It was early in the morning time, like about 6 o'clock, 6:30. The sun had just come up. It was a cold day, and there was fog on the road and fog rising from the retention pond. And I sat there and I said, this sure is a beautiful day, baby. And at that same time, I realized that she was looking down and she could see this beautiful day. You know?
And that's something that I don't know if Tracy, if you suggest this, but, just a lot of times I've got this thing in the morning where I wake up and I usually try to thank you, Lord, for letting me get up out of bed another day and so forth. And, we spend a lot of times, people might say that we're talking to ourselves, and we're not talking to ourselves, we're talking to somebody.
Right.
And I don't know if this is correct, Tracy, but I think it's a darn good thing that Dan continues having conversations with his wife.
Absolutely. I met with a lady just a few weeks ago, and she shared with me that her family was getting upset with her because she continued to talk to her husband, and her response was, I've been talking to him for 54 years. He'd be really mad at me if I stopped talking to him just because he died. And so that's what she just kept saying to her family over and over, is that I've talked to him for 54 years. I'm not going to stop because he died. And that is important. Again, death ends a life, but not a relationship. So you talk to her if you need to, just as if she was still there, because that is part of.
Yeah.
Okay. Tracy, also, just something that I meant to do at the beginning of the show, I'm slipping in my old age, is give me a number or a website that our listeners can visit if they would like to consult with you further.
Absolutely. That's www.newhopefl.com. New Hope is NEWHOPEFL.com.
Okay, and is there a phone number?
704-2527.
Okay, and we'll try to hit that again. Dan, look, I can't thank you enough for calling in today and sharing this with us. That's one of the things that I've really strived to do with Life Radio, is make it a little bit more interactive and invite calls to come in. And I don't know if you're a regular listener, but as you know, I try to really concentrate hard on our veterans and our seniors and health care and Medicare and stuff like that. And you've really added a lot to the show today, and I just want to thank you so much for calling in with us.
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the time. Y'all have a nice Christmas.
Okay, you too,
Thank
Danny.
you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, Tracy, that was touching. I'm going to have to get a tissue here if this keeps up. I don't know how you do your job.
Well, that's another funny thing. A lot of people will say that to me. I don't know how you do that. I'm so sensitive. And I just look at them and say, I do it because I'm insensitive.
Right.
We're all, we all sensitive. And it's just about learning how to, I can't fix it. It's horrible.
Right.
But as a therapist, we're taught to fix things and help people resolve their issues. And you don't resolve grief. You sit with someone while they hurt and you get them through it, but you don't fix it or resolve it.
And I think one of the things that you bring to the table, and Lord knows family members try, but it seems like if you're too many times you're talking with a family member, and I know I'm guilty about this, it's all about me sometimes, and I've got to back off that, but a lot of times somebody will be talking with you and everything, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're sharing a story that they had, and all of a sudden the conversation becomes about them. And I think that's one of the things that you really bring to the table when you consult with your clients, is that it's one-on-one, and we're going to spend this time, this hour or whatever, talking about you, so you can get a lot of things taken care of.
Absolutely. When you come to counseling, it is all about the person sitting in my chair. We don't talk about me, my problems, my issues, whereas with a family member, you can kind of sidetrack and get lost in other conversation. But in counseling, it's all about you and your issue.
Okay, folks, we're talking to Tracy Riley. She is a grief counselor. When we come back, we're going to talk about the definitions of two of the key words that we're talking about here today, grief and mourning, and how we deal with it. You're listening to Life Radio on Talk Radio 600 WBOB. We appreciate you sitting in with us today. We'll be right back after these messages.
Talk Radio 600 WBOB. Now let's return to Life Radio. Brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303. The Orange Park Cancer Center at 276-2303. Here's your host, John Vitas.
And welcome back to Life Radio here on this beautiful Sunday morning. I am so glad you joined us here today. And we opened up the show this morning talking about things like Merry Christmas to everybody. I want to reiterate that. I hope everybody has a nice, safe holiday. Just be careful out there. I hope there's going to be some last-minute shoppers out there, and they're probably, just make sure they don't have any pepper spray. So you guys be nice out there. Remember, it's the Lord's birthday this season. That's what we're celebrating. I know that my wife got a little bit flustered about, getting this person a present or that person a present, or should we buy for that person and so forth. And I said, Debbie, stop. Let's just remember what we're celebrating here. It's the reason for the season.
That's right, John. Let me share with you. Yesterday, I was driving on a road where it was merging into one due to construction somewhere in Jacksonville. Can you believe there's construction in Jacksonville?
No.
And this guy cut me off. He just wouldn't let me in. And I rolled down my window and I'm like, Merry Christmas to you too. And my kids are like, Mom, roll the window up. And I'm like, it's Christmas and he won't let me in. I'm so bad. So
yeah, I tell you what, it's crazy out there, and some people kind of lose touch out there. So stay in the game, folks. Remember what Christmas is all about. And also, speaking of giving, I want to thank a couple of my sponsors there for giving me the opportunity to keep the show rolling, and that is the Orange Park Cancer Center, Dr. Dwelvin Simmons. As a matter of fact, I shared some email with Dr. Simmons last night. We're going to see if we can't get him back on the show there, and he's got one of his cohorts over there, Dr. Tom Marsland, also that works out of that cancer center over on Kingsley Avenue, and they're going to come in and we're going to talk about some cancer treatment and so forth. And unfortunately, we are going to have to talk about, at one point, what do we do here, because it looks like that the cancer is going to win and how we deal with that. So kind of a touching subject, but something that we fortunately all have to deal with, since everybody, I think, that on this planet probably knows someone who is unfortunately gotten cancer and having to deal with that. Also, I'd like to thank Johnny's Custom Creations. Johnny, a close friend of mine, a really good fella, and he owns an auto body shop, and it's called Johnny's Customs Creations, and you can go to johnnyscustomcreations.com, see some of their fine work. The guy's on top of his game. Also, I'd like to thank my good friend up in Georgia, Mr. Phil Kent. He is the CEO of the American Seniors Association, and the American Seniors Association, ladies and gentlemen, is what I like to commonly refer to as a conservative alternative to the left-leaning AARP. Also, Dr. June Gentle. Many of my listeners know that I've spent a lot of my life crashing motorcycles and cars and that kind of thing, and Dr. June Gentle is a chiropractic, and I thank her so much for keeping my bones cracked out there. Also, last on the list, but certainly not least, is our good friends over at Best Buy Golf Carts. They're at 284-5300. Great bunch of folks over there. They're just north of Green Cove Springs, but believe me, if you're in the market for a shopping cart, I'm thinking Christmas again. If you're in the mood for a golf cart, or you just want to accessorize that thing, give them a call at 284-5300. Okay, we are in the studio today with Miss Tracy Riley, and Tracy is teaching us how to deal with grief, but she's trying to keep a little bit of a happy thing to it as well. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about, we hear at sermons and so forth, when we have the loss of a loved one, and that is, look, don't dwell on the bad times. Remember all the good times you had. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to keep it upbeat a little bit here, but obviously this is a serious subject. And before we left, we talked about defining the two key words here today that we're going to be discussing, and that is grief and mourning. And Tracy, I thought they were the same thing.
A lot of people think those words are the same, and they are often used interchangeably, but I want to take a minute to define them just a little bit, because that makes it easier to understand how we can heal our hearts. What I like to consider grief is the collection of our internal thoughts and feelings when someone we love dies. You can think of grief as the container where all your thoughts, your feelings, and your memories are contained. If we step over to mourning for a minute, that's when you take the grief you have on the inside and you express it outside of yourself. Another way of defining that is grief gone public. And there's many, many examples of how we mourn someone. We talk about the person that died. We cry. We use art or music. We celebrate a special anniversary or a birthday or something. And it's just a way of giving honor to the person that has gone before us. So those are the distinctions. Is grief is what we feel, and mourning is how we express it.
There are a lot of times that I've seen out there, and that is the inability to accept and or to pass blame. Oh, if that ambulance driver would have got here first and foremost, or that. Do you ever have any that your your clients, I guess is the word I'm going to use, come in and that's what you spot immediately is that they're blaming this for the death or that for the death, and what is really happening here is just their inability to accept.
Absolutely. What we call that is kind of using that as a distraction to the real issue of the loss. If people can take their attention to blaming someone or wanting someone else to accept the responsibility, then it distracts them from having the real issue at hand, and that's grief and mourning and getting past that. And so I see this a lot when I deal with families who have been affected by homicide. They want to focus on who did it and did that person get justice and all these other things. Grief and mourning is so hard. Our bodies are just... we can only mourn so much at once, so we have to do it in little doses. And so when we can have other distractions, like who did it and did they get justice, and if the ambulance driver had went to a different hospital, that it just serves as a distraction. But I see it often, and it's just the body's way and the mind's way of not taking in the death all at once, because we can't handle that. We have to mourn in small doses sometimes.
We're talking to Tracy Riley today here on Life Radio, and we're dealing with grief and mourning, the loss of a loved one here, especially during the Christmas holiday. And if you've got a story, something you'd like to share with us today, please feel free to call us at 854-1320. That number is 854-1320. And if you've got something that maybe is on your mind, something eating at you, having to do with grief or mourning the loss of a loved one, Tracy is online and she's ready for your calls. So if you've got something you'd like to add to the show or a question you'd like to ask Tracy, the phone lines once again are open at 854-1320. Okay, you pretty much said that mourning is when the grief that you have is that on the inside is expressed on the outside itself, and I guess a good way to define it is grief gone public, as you
right.
put it in some of your writings. What are some of the suggestions you give to someone who, I guess what I'm trying to say here, Tracy, is, okay, grief, you've got it bottled up on the inside. Mourning is it's coming out on the, it's being verbal or expressed on the outside. And am I safe to assume that mourning's an actual good thing? I mean, that you need to let it out? Is that kind of like if we're mad at someone and we just don't say anything, it just builds up and builds up?
Right, absolutely. Mourning is a wonderful thing, and that is how we heal the heart and how we get through having to say goodbye to someone. There is a wonderful author, and we've all heard of her. Her name is Anonymous.
Mm-hmm. I know her.
Yeah, and it's definitely a female, without a doubt.
Oh, I'm sure.
She wrote, when we experience a loss, a hole opens up inside of us. It's almost as if the hole explodes in us, leaving us gasping for air. So if you think of when you experience a loss, we do have trouble breathing, and so our body wants to shut down, and we just can only function on a certain few things, and we have to figure out healthy ways to mourn, which crying, Dan said that his wife would get onto him for crying, but crying really is a healthy sign of mourning. That's not a sign of weakness. That is being able to express yourself and honor someone that has went before us. When we love, John, we love from the outside in, but when we mourn from the inside out. And there's another word that I want to share the definition. It's the word bereavement. And that word actually means to be robbed, to have special needs, and to be torn apart. And can you think of a time where you would feel more torn apart than if your husband of many years dies? Or wouldn't you feel robbed if your child were to die? So that word by its very definition tells you that you need to slow down and take time for yourself and make sure that you're doing things in a healthy way to mourn the loss of someone and give honor to those that have went before us.
Well, it sounds to me like what you're saying here, Tracy, is that bereavement, that's almost like you're getting mad now rather than being sad or expressing some emotion. That's almost like you're PO'd, in lack of a better word, which obviously is not going to make you think clearly. And that's something that I really hope that we harp on here today is how that we can balance the issue of mourning and grieving and still keep on with our everyday lives, because obviously that's a big juggle, and people think time is a big juggle in life. We'll try dealing with some grief and
Right.
mourning, so forth. We've got to go to break here in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, I am talking to Tracy Riley. Tracy Riley is helping us deal with the grief of a lost one, loss of a loved one, especially here during the holidays. Season's Grievings, that's our topic for today here on Life Radio. My name is John Vitas. I'm your host. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay with us.
Talk Radio 600 WBOB. Now let's return to Life Radio. Brought to you by Dr. Dwelvin Simmons of the Orange Park Cancer Center. Call 276-2303. The Orange Park Cancer Center at 276-2303. Here's your host, John Vitas.
Morning and welcome to Life Radio here on this nice Sunday morning. A little bit colder than I expected. I almost got on that motorcycle, but anytime I have to start putting on 8 or 9 pair of long johns just to go riding, ain't going to happen. So it was Ford Day today, so we drove to work in the lap of luxury, I guess you could say. And
Long Johns, John, Long Johns. You're showing your age. We don't call them Long Johns anymore.
what do call them now?
I think they're called thermal.
Oh, no,
thermals or
that's the way.
something?
That sounds too green to me.
But
and
I
I'm a
am from
conservative.
Alabama, so I know what Long Johns are.
Okay. Or long handles.
I'm from Alabama. I know those terms.
Well, something, speaking of that, I can't find the ones with the flap in the back like the old days we used to see on the cartoons, the little buttons. But I guess maybe Sears catalog just left that page out this year. I don't know. Okay, we're joking and carrying on a little bit, but we're gonna have to segue into the more serious side. And Tracy, I think that's one of the things that I really can appreciate what you bring to the table, because that's part of people being in a bad mood. It's our nature to try to make them feel better and so forth. And a lot of times, the grieving is kind of out of our out of the local the layman's hands, if you will. So there is a need for a person of your sorts, if you will, and I wanted to ask, if you would, could you please give our listeners your website again?
www.newhopefl.com. And my office line is 904-704-2527. And if anybody doesn't get that, they can certainly call the station here, right? And that information will be available to give to them as well.
Can I give them the number for the station?
Yes.
Okay, the number here at Talk Radio 600 WBOB is 854-1320. Here's that number again, 854-1320. If you've got an issue, some bereavement, or you're mourning the loss of a loved one, or you've got some grief issues, remember, give us a call. You can get a little bit of assistance right here today on the Life Radio Show, thanks to the kind-hearted Tracy Riley. So, Tracy, we have kind of spent the first part of the show here talking about grief and mourning and so forth. Let's see if we can't segue that into the holidays themselves. We got the holidays coming up. What are some good pointers you can give our listeners out there?
What I want to talk about our last little bit of time together as we prepare kind of to wrap up our conversation, I do want to give our listeners some practical ideas on how to keep their loved one's memory present during the holiday time. And we have to combine our mourning, because mourning is something that we're going to do. You remember I said grief has a beginning but no end, so we're always going to mourn the loss of a life and find ways to honor that person. So I like to look at this as combining the mourning with the celebration, especially here at Christmas time. And the first thing that I would say, first and foremost, is be compassionate with yourself. We've talked about mourning and grief and being bereaved, and it's hard work and it's exhausting. And so when we experience a great loss, our bodies will go into survival mode. We even lose our sense of thirst. So it's important just to remember the basic things. Drink lots of water, rest often, try to incorporate maybe a 20-minute walk every day. Surround yourself with supportive people who will let you tell the same stories over and over and over again, because you need to have people around you listening to the story of your family member or your friend that has passed away. The second thing that I would say is, and I told Dan this on the phone, is to hang a stocking. If your Christmas tradition includes hanging stockings on the mantle or the fireplace, then hang one in memory of the person who died. And encourage everyone in the home to write letters to that person, and anybody that stops by to visit you during the holiday season, ask them to put notes in the stocking as well with special memories of that person. And then on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning, at whatever point you open all of your stockings, someone someone can take all of those memories out, those notes, and read them, and everyone gets to hear and share. And it's a time of remembrance, and it's a way to honor that person that has went on before you.
And I think that's very important. You know, so many people get caught up in I need to go buy this $30 gift, or I need to buy that $50 gift. And that, what you just told me, is priceless. And those are the kind of things that need to be brought to the forefront there. I mean, there is no way that I'm going to be able to sit here, because my parents are still alive, and the majority of, all my family, direct family members, siblings, so forth, are still alive as well. And so all I can do is relate to the loss of my best friend Steve there, and that is one of the things that I think, like I said, keeps me going, is the fact that I'll sit there and in my travels, or especially when I'm out there, spinning wrenches on a motorcycle or something. Those are the kind of times that come back to me, and it helped me, kind of survive and kind of keep my chin up, if you will. But that's very impressive what you said about the putting some things in the stocking.
Right.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, all of our movies, our timeless movies, teach us holidays don't really come from a store; they come from the heart and from the soul. And another thing that I always recommend, the holidays are always about group rituals. We do family dinners, and we gather, and we go to services at our church, and we decorate our tree, and we bake cookies. And so there's so many things that you can do in a group setting or a family setting. And I always recommend to people that they create their own private ritual as a way to honor the person that has went before them. And that may be any number of things, that bring flowers to the cemetery, or volunteer at a local organization that was important to your family member that died. It's a ritual that you decide that's important to you, and you repeat that every year, just as an ongoing way to honor that unique relationship that you had with someone and that you continue to have. I also like to recommend that if you have a person that's died, maybe you were planning to get them something special for Christmas. Maybe they died this year, and you wanted to get him or her something really special. I would say go ahead and buy that gift. Go ahead and buy it, wrap it up, make it as if you were actually going to give it to your family member, but instead present that gift to someone that you know would appreciate it. Or you could give it anonymously, accompanied by a note explaining the gift's significance, so that you can find a way to go ahead and keep that memory of the gift alive and honor that person.
Yeah, Tracy, you kind of brought something else up to me as well. It's like just because you lost them, physically, doesn't mean that they're gone mentally. And so to keep them in your thoughts is a big thing. And it's a lot of people, they say, well, I just need to go ahead and cut this off now. I need to go ahead and take my wedding ring off because, I'm technically not married anymore. And I can tell you from experience, if I ever lost my wife, that wedding band staying right there. They, keep those memories alive. And it's something that you said, too. It's kind of like we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the show when my old self wakes up in the morning, the first thing is, usually the first thing is, if not, I'll catch it on the way to work, is thank you, Lord, for letting my heart beat again. And
that's right. And
when you wake up Christmas morning and you have lost a loved one and so forth, go ahead and have that conversation with you. Say, hey, I miss you. I sure appreciate all the, it was so joyful, all the holidays we spent together, but I know in my heart that you would want me to be strong.
Right.
And you want me to maintain my composure, because something that I think it was Dan talked about earlier was, the crying thing. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a couple tears to yourself and so forth. Now, you might have kids out there that you're trying to let them know that you're trying to stay strong and so forth, but emotion is something that God put in us so we wouldn't explode. We've got to let those emotions out. Would you agree?
That's a good one, John. I'm impressed. Very good. Our life is made to live forward. But sometimes in order to do that, we do have to look backwards at where we've come from and the people who have helped us along the way. I met with a man about a year ago, and his wife had been killed unexpectedly here in Jacksonville, and he had 3 young children, and they ranged in age. I can't remember. One was a toddler, and the other 2 were probably preteens. And every time I would meet with him, he would say, no, my kids are doing fine. They're doing fine. These 3 children lost their mother unexpectedly. And I remember sharing with a friend of mine, I hope if something happened to me that my kids would not be doing fine.
Right.
I would want to know that I had such an impact in their lives, that they would miss me or that there would be some remembrance of me. But this man, trying to be very, very brave, just kept saying, no, we're doing fine. We're doing fine. And the reality is, if you lose someone very unexpectedly like that, you're not doing fine. And you need to be able to say that. And we were talking at one of the breaks, even if you do kind of anticipate that someone's going to die, you're still never really ready for that death.
There's only so much you can do. I mean, sure, it's not quite as shocking as it normally would be.
Right.
Well, Tracy, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us here today. And that website, folks, the girl knows what she's talking about. Make yourself feel better. And sometimes you're not going to be able to do it with the help of family members. So make sure you go to
www.newhopefl.com.
Okay, I just want to thank you once again, Tracy, for joining me here today on Life Radio. I want to thank all my sponsors, and I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and have a safe holiday out there, and we'll see you back on air. I think I'm going to come back on January 1st. Let's see how many of you are going to be listening to me and don't have a hangover. You're listening to Life Radio on Talk Radio 600 WBOB. We'll see you next week.